Welcome to part 1 of the Azure Stack HCI Technical Sales Specialist Training Series. My name is Manfred Helber and I'm a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional in the category Cloud and Data Center. In part 1, we are talking about Azure Stack HCI Basics. When we first have a look at a slide where we can see a comparison between a 3-tier traditional infrastructure on the left-hand side and HCI solution on the right-hand side, we can see clearly the difference. In an HCI infrastructure, we are using industry standard servers to provide the virtualization for the compute, the software-defined storage, and software-defined networking. In the traditional stack, on the left-hand side, we typically have SAN systems to provide the storage functionality. Additionally, storage fabric switches to connect the storage SAN systems to the hypervisors. Additionally, network appliances and switches. And in this hyperconverged infrastructure stack on the right-hand side, we trust on industry standard servers, the power and technique in industry standard servers combined with an software-defined stack regarding the storage and the networking. And typically, this software-defined stack is provided by a powerful operating system. The name of the Microsoft HCI operating system is Azure Stack HCI. In Azure Stack HCI, we can start with a very small implementation with only 2 servers. You always need additionally an Active Directory domain, and you need a witness. The witness can be a file share. This can be an Azure witness. So it depends on your infrastructure, what you prefer. These 2 servers we need minimum for the HCI stack. They can be equipped with minimum 4 flash drives or 2 flash drives combined with hard disk drives. More servers and more hard disks are possible. We can expand to up to 16 servers with up to 4 petabyte of storage, and we can combine many of these 16 server clusters within a cluster set. What's important to know, when we think about Azure Stack HCI, our hypervisor is always HyperV. HyperV supports and runs Windows Server operating systems, but also Windows Client operating systems. And yes, HyperV also supports previous Windows Server versions, even the versions that are already out of support, because we will learn later in this training that Azure Stack HCI provides extended security updates for your environment, so you can still have support even for the older Windows Server operating systems. HyperV is not only perfect for Windows virtualization, it's also perfect for Linux virtualization. We have support for different Red Hat distributions, SUSE, Ubuntu, Debian, Oracle Linux, CentOS. So HyperV is the hypervisor for Windows and non-Windows workloads. When you think about how to manage HyperV, we have the Windows Admin Center. It's a web-based graphical tool we will see later in this workshop in several live demos. If you prefer to script your administrative tasks, you can use the Windows PowerShell. We have still the traditional tools like Hyper-V Manager and Failover Cluster Manager. And in specific scenarios, it may be helpful to license additionally the System Center suite where you can use the System Virtual Machine Manager. Windows Admin Center, Windows PowerShell, and Hyper-V Management are included without additional costs. For the System Center Virtual Machine Manager, you will have to license the System Center suite. When we look a little bit more in detail about the Azure Stack HCI stack, then we already heard we are starting with industry standard servers. Minimum are 2 servers. Here we see a configuration based on 3 servers. And here we see a configuration based on a hybrid storage concept. I already mentioned it's also possible to have flash only what's not possible, to have only hard disks in the configuration. So we always need a specific capacity in flash storage, or we can have a full flash configuration. When we are combining hard disk drives and flash drives, then the flash drives will be selected as cache drives, and the hard disk drives will be configured as capacity drives. If we combine different flash types, for example, NVMe and SSD, then also the faster flash tier will be configured as cache. So here we can see some possible drive configurations. What we here see is always the minimum configuration for one server. It's not possible to have one server with only NVMe's and one server with NVMe's and SSDs in combination, and one server with SSDs only. So these are different scenarios. So we can have all the servers with NVMe only, or all the servers with SSD only, or all the servers with NVMe and hard disk in combination. But we cannot mix these different scenarios we can see here. So the first thing is very, very powerful and very interesting, because the prices, were reduced in the last years enormously in the flash storage area. So NVMe for capacity, a full NVMe configuration, is, besides the full persistent memory configuration that's also possible, one of the fastest deployments you can configure. And you should always keep this in mind and have an eye on this configuration and compare prices. Because when you look alternatively at the second configuration option, where you combine NVMe's and SSDs, it's important to know that the cache capacity, so the NVMe's, cannot be used as storage capacity. So they are only for optimizing the performance, these cache drives. So in the second option we have configured here, or the second configuration option we can see here, in comparison to the first one, in the first one, all the 4 drives are for capacity and also performance for sure. In the second configuration option, the SSDs are for capacity, the NVMe's are for cache. And now you have to check what's your requirement for the performance of the configuration, and what's your demand in storage capacity, and what's the price difference between these two configurations. There can be a price today different from the price tomorrow, because as you know, these are always daily prices in the storage market. But my recommendation is to compare these different options. What's also interesting is the flash-only configuration with only SSDs. This is also possible to have all the servers with SSDs only, and don't, let's say, not waste, don't use capacity for cache. But I mentioned the cache drive capacity cannot use to store data. It's also possible to combine NVMe's and hard disk drives. I would have an eye on this configuration if I need huge capacities with an optimized price. It's also supported to have SSDs and hard disk drives in combination. It's also supported, but I don't know any OEM partner that's providing this configuration, to have all 3 technologies in one server system. In this configuration, we have a 3-tier storage, where the NVMe's are for caching, the SSDs for the fast storage capacity tier, and the hard disks for the capacity tier. When we are talking about cache, many people think, oh, cache is a losable storage. So if we lose the cache, we lose storage, we lose data. But in Azure Stack HCI, it's important to know that the cache is also redundant, because storage spaces direct ensures that via this in blue color provided storage layer here, this virtual storage layer, we have a distributed storage of the data across the servers to ensure that we have redundancy regarding the cache, if a cache is provided, and regarding the data that's stored on the capacity drives, here in this scenario, the hard disk capacity drives. In this specific scenario, we have a 3-node cluster with a 3-way mirror. This is an interesting redundancy option where we have the original data extend or slab. Storage spaces direct stores the data in extends or slab, and we have one copy here and a second copy here. So we don't copy servers or hard disks, but we copy this extends. We will go deeper in this definition and the way how this works later in this course. And we will also see how Storage Spaces Direct distributes the data across the servers in detail. So for this point here, it's important to understand that the data is always redundant across the servers. So if a server fails, or hard drives fails, or several hard drives fail, we will not have any data loss if anything is configured according to the configuration requirements. So important is also Azure Stack HCI has Azure in the name. We can read here Azure. So Azure Stack HCI runs on your physical servers, on your physical on-premises. It's a bare metal operating system. So this is also important to understand. Azure Stack HCI is not a technology. The technology behind Azure Stack HCI to provide the virtualization is HyperV. The technology in Azure Stack HCI to provide the software-defined storage is Storage Spaces Direct. And the technology in Azure Stack HCI to provide the software-defined networking is SDN. So Azure Stack HCI is the bare metal OS that runs on your physical servers on premises, provided by certified OEMs. This is important. The hardware is always certified by the OEMs, and we have a catalog where we can select an Azure Stack HCI solution that fits to our requirements. Important is also to know that Azure Stack HCI is always installed as a server core installation. So if you look at the screenshot, the middle of these 3 screenshots, this is very well known to you. You know this from a Windows Server setup where you have this blue screen and the operating system version, and you select your language, your time and currency. Here you can read Azure Stack HCI, and when the setup is finished, you will see a server core command console. You will see a PowerShell in Azure Stack HCI 21H2. If you never worked with server core, you maybe will be afraid how to handle this. We will see this later in several live demos. It's very, very easy to manage Azure Stack HCI via Windows Admin Center. Windows Admin Center is the web-based graphical tool to manage Azure Stack HCI, to manage also Windows Server, and for sure to manage graphical user interface installations, but also server core installations. So Azure Stack HCI on premises, on our hardware, always the server core installation, and Azure Stack HCI is natively integrated with Azure, and it's connected to Azure. It's not required to have a 24/7 connectivity to Azure. So Azure Stack HCI keeps up and running if you are disconnected from Azure for several minutes, for several hours, for several days. If you are disconnected from Azure for more than 30 days, then you will not have any impact on your workload. All your virtual machines will keep up and running. All your storage will keep accessible. You will never see a downtime for your workload because you have a disconnecting scenario from Azure or disconnectivity from Azure. But if you are disconnected from Azure longer than 30 days, you will not be able to create new virtual machines because Azure Stack HCI has to be registered to Microsoft Azure because the billing is based on the CPU cores in your machines. This means you don't have any upfront costs for Azure Stack HCI except the hardware. You will buy the hardware from your preferred OEM hardware vendor. You will install Azure Stack HCI or find it pre-installed by your hardware vendor. Then you have 60 days free for testing where you are not charged, and then you will have costs based on your physical CPU cores. And these costs will be charged by Microsoft Azure. And this is the reason why you have to be connected to Microsoft Azure. A second reason is that Azure Stack HCI is Azure. It runs on your premises. It runs on your hardware, it runs in your server environment or data center. It's an hyper-converged infrastructure solution. It looks like Windows Server in the server core installation, but it's able to execute Azure workloads. Great workloads like Azure Kubernetes services, like extended security updates, or like Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure Stack HCI. And this is specific and exclusive to Azure Stack HCI. So important, connectivity is not needed to be up and running 24/7. It can be limited sometimes where you don't have any impact, but Azure Stack HCI is not designed for completely disconnected scenario because you need this connectivity to Azure minimum every 30 days to upload your core information for billing. Included in Azure Stack HCI is that you will receive new versions based on your subscription. I mentioned Azure Stack HCI is a subscription. You pay per physical core per month. And the first version of Azure Stack HCI was 20H2. It was provided in December 2020, and the first update was provided in October 21, and every customer that was using Azure Stack HCI could upgrade of Azure Stack HCI version 21H2 for free without additional cost. It's included in the monthly costs for Azure Stack HCI. When you are asking, okay, the upgrade is free, when do I have to upgrade? For the customers that were running Azure Stack HCI version 20H2, they have to upgrade latest in April 2022, 19th of April 2022 to Azure Stack HCI version 21H2. So the last version was published, or the version 21H2 was published in October 21. So typically within 6 months, we have to upgrade to the next new version, but we don't have any additional costs. We don't have to buy this new version. We also expect a new version this year. We don't have any detailed information about this, but Microsoft promised when Azure Stack HCI was published that we will see 1 or 2 new versions each year. So I would expect that we will see a new Azure Stack HCI version in the second half of 2022. It's also possible to have an Azure Stack HCI support via Microsoft Azure. And I strongly would recommend to you to really have this Azure support subscription for Azure Stack HCI. Here we can read it starts with $29 per month. $29, this is for development scenarios. So for production environments, you will have something like $100 per month. But if you compare this to traditional support models in the Microsoft ecosystem, this is a great offer where you can get dedicated support for your Azure Stack HCI hybrid environment. And it's not per node, it's not per core, it's not per cluster, it's per customer to book this additional support. What's also great to know about Azure Stack HCI, I already mentioned this, Azure Stack HCI is Microsoft Azure. It runs on your servers, it runs on premises, but it's seen as Microsoft Azure by the workload. So Azure Stack and Azure Stack HCI enables us to bring Azure workloads and benefits to on-premises on our Azure Stack HCI solutions. We already have some of these advantages from Azure. So when we have a look at Windows Server, yes, we have Windows Server also on HyperV. We have Windows Server also on competing hypervisor solutions in the market. For sure, we have to license for Windows Server. But what's exclusive on Azure Stack HCI, it's that we have the dedicated Azure editions. Maybe you have heard about Windows Server 2022 Data Center Azure Edition. It's a Windows Server edition with extended feature set you can run in Azure and on Azure Stack HCI. We have the free extended security updates. Extended security updates are available for customers that want to pay for it when the extended the security life cycle of a product ended. It's included if you migrate your workload to Azure, and because Azure Stack HCI is Azure, you will also receive extended security updates when you move your workload to Azure Stack HCI. We can run Azure Kubernetes services, so the container orchestration on Azure Stack HCI. We can use managed SQL apps and services, platform as a services. It's in preview actually, but we will see a lot of new of these features. And what I really like from the experience I had already in my preview systems here is Azure Virtual Desktop. Azure Virtual Desktop is a technology where you can run your remote desktop working scenario based on traditional RDS hosts, based on Windows Server, or virtual desktop infrastructure, or virtual desktop infrastructure with Windows 11 or 10 multi-user. This is only available in Azure Virtual Desktop, and with Azure Stack HCI, you can run Azure Virtual Desktop on premises. So we will see more and more of these workloads and benefits on Azure Stack HCI. This means Azure Stack HCI is also perfect for you if you are interested in Azure workloads, but you want to run them on premises in your data center, in your environment. Azure Management and Governance is also provided for Azure Stack HCI. This means we can use Azure for monitoring. We will see this later in this training, in this course. We will see a live demo how to configure Azure Monitor for Azure Stack HCI. We can use management functionality from the Azure portal. We can use Windows Admin Center on premises. We can deploy Windows Admin Center in Azure. We can manage Azure VMs from Windows Admin Center on premises. We can manage on premises services from Windows Admin Center in Azure. And we can use the Azure portal to deploy virtual machines on Azure Stack HCI, for example. So this is really great what's possible there already today and in the future. Auto-Manage is available in Azure, and this is available in a private preview already for Azure Stack HCI. Disaster recovery, we will see Azure Site Recovery and Azure Backup later in this workshop, in this technical sales specialist workshop, and also for sure in the development specialist in the hybrid administrator. So you will see the disaster recovery configuration. You will see the PowerShell module functionality, and there will be also a lot of additional platform extensions for Azure Stack HCI. Also, Azure infrastructure innovations will be provided for Azure Stack HCI. So we have a lot of capabilities we can already use in the Azure data centers, but we don't have in Windows Server, in traditional Windows Server. Because Azure Stack HCI is Microsoft Azure, we can already see features here like extended GPU support, GPUs with GPU pooling, where we can provide GPU power to virtual machines, but not dedicated with a one-to-one connectivity via discrete device assignment. But we have a GPU pooling to provide GPUs for high available virtual machines. We have the dynamic CPU compatibility. This is very important when you plan to expand your Azure Stack HCI cluster later in the future, where maybe some CPUs are not any longer available. With the CPU compatibility, we have an exclusive feature in Azure Stack HCI that provides the maximum compatibility level between these different CPU feature sets. We have thin provisioning for volumes in Azure Stack HCI. This is a storage spaces direct functionality, but it's only available in Azure Stack HCI. Secured core servers can be configured, and secure core servers are part of the certification for Azure Stack HCI integrated systems. So a secured server ensures you that all the required technologies like trusted platform module and so on are integrated in this server system. When we have a look at the demo in the Windows Admin Center later in this course, you will see that the secured core server can also be configured and will be visible in the Windows Admin Center. When we configure Azure Stack HCI, we will see how easy it is to work with the network, and it's even more easy if we use Network ATC. Network ATC is a great technology if you don't only configure one Azure Stack HCI cluster, but many Azure Stack HCI clusters, where you always have this intent and template-based configuration. And on Azure Stack HCI, we also have technologies in the future that support us to reduce the time for patching the servers. The name for it is kernel soft reboot, and it will also be available in the future for Azure Stack HCI certified systems.